Witness the shocking twists of a first-date horror story that will keep you on the edge of your seat and remind you that not all encounters end well. In the sprawling concrete jungle of online dating, finding the one can feel like navigating a minefield. You swipe left, you swipe right, hoping against hope to stumble upon someone who checks all the boxes, someone who's charming, funny, and doesn't send those cringe-worthy pickup lines. Someone perhaps like Brad. At least that's what Emily thought when she first stumbled upon his profile. He looked like he walked straight out of a rom-com, all tousled hair and sparkling eyes. His bio boasted about his love for dogs, travel, and his self-proclaimed talent for dad jokes. Emily, a sucker for a good laugh, even at someone else's expense, swiped right. And just like that, a match was made. Little did she know this digital connection would soon spiral into a real-life nightmare. Days melted into a whirlwind of witty banter and virtual flirting. Brad was everything his profile promised, charming, funny, and surprisingly easy to talk to. He even managed to make Emily laugh with his corny jokes, a feat she hadn't expected. As they messaged back and forth, Emily felt a flicker of hope ignite within her. Maybe, just maybe, this could be something real. After a week of digital courtship, Brad finally popped the question dinner at a trendy Italian bistro downtown. Emily, her stomach doing somersaults of both excitement and trepidation, accepted. As she meticulously planned her outfit and mentally rehearsed potential conversation starters, a wave of optimism washed over her. Tonight was going to be different. Tonight was going to be perfect. The restaurant was buzzing with a Friday night energy as Emily nervously smoothed down her dress. Just as her anxiety threatened to overwhelm her, a familiar figure emerged from the throng of people. Brad, even more handsome in person, flashed her a smile that made her knees go weak. He was every bit the charming prince she'd imagined, right down to the single red rose he presented her with a playful bow. "You look even better than your pictures," he said, holding her gaze with an intensity that sent shivers down her spine. As they settled into their candle-lit booth, the conversation flowed effortlessly between them, punctuated by Brad's charming anecdotes and Emily's infectious laughter. For a fleeting moment, the world outside the warm glow of the restaurant faded away, and Emily allowed herself to believe that she might have actually found something special. The first course arrived, a colorful caprese salad drizzled with balsamic glaze. Emily, her appetite piqued, savored the fresh mozzarella and juicy tomatoes. Brad, however, barely touched his plate. He pushed the basil leaves around with his fork, a deep furrow etched between his brows. Emily, noticing his sudden shift in mood, brushed it off as first-date jitters. "Everyone got nervous sometimes, right? Everything okay?" Emily asked, her voice tinged with concern. Brad, startled by her question, quickly composed himself. "Oh yeah, everything's fine," he said, flashing her a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Just thinking about this work project. It's been stressing me out." Emily, wanting to lighten the mood, shared a funny story about a work mishap of her own. Brad chuckled politely, but his earlier enthusiasm seemed to have waned. As the server cleared their salad plates, Emily noticed a marked change in Brad's demeanor. His casual charm had evaporated, replaced by a curtness that made her feel uneasy. When the server returned to take their order for the main course, Brad's transformation was complete. He peppered the poor young man with questions, his tone bordering on aggressive. "Is the salmon wild-caught or farm-raised?" he demanded, his voice sharp. "And what kind of oil do you use for cooking? I have very specific dietary needs." The server, clearly flustered by Brad's interrogation, stammered out responses, his eyes darting nervously between Brad and the notepad in his hand. Emily, mortified by Brad's behavior, shrank lower in her seat, wishing she could melt into the floor. The server hurried away, relieved to escape Brad's intense scrutiny. Emily, struggling to regain her composure, attempted to salvage the date. She asked Brad about his travels, hoping to steer the conversation to safer territory. Brad, momentarily distracted from his culinary interrogation, launched into a story about his backpacking trip through Europe. He recounted a tale of how he'd tricked a fellow traveler into eating a cricket by disguising it as a local delicacy. Emily, forcing a laugh, felt a knot of unease tighten in her stomach. What kind of person found amusement in something so mean-spirited? Sensing her discomfort, Brad quickly added, "Just a harmless prank. You've got to have a sense of humor about these things." Despite the red flags popping up like landmines, Emily clung to a sliver of hope that the evening could be salvaged. Maybe Brad was just nervous, trying too hard to impress her. As they waited for their main courses, the conversation turned to relationships. "I believe in a strong hand," Brad declared, swirling the remaining wine in his glass. "A relationship needs a leader, someone who takes charge. Don't you agree?" Emily, taken aback by his words, carefully replied, "I think it's more about partnership. About finding a balance. You know, equals?" Brad chuckled, a condescending smirk playing on his lips. "That's what they all say," he said, his eyes boring into hers. "But trust me, a little obedience goes a long way." A shiver ran down Emily's spine. Obedience? This was definitely not how she envisioned a healthy relationship. The main courses arrived, a stark contrast on the otherwise pristine white tablecloth. Emily's salmon, cooked to perfection, was a work of culinary art. Brad's risotto, however, looked like a culinary crime scene. Before Emily could even take a bite, Brad slammed his fork down, the sound echoing through the now silent restaurant. "This is unacceptable!" Brad boomed, his voice dripping with disdain. "This risotto is overcooked, underseasoned, and frankly an insult to Italian cuisine." Diners at nearby tables gawked, their hushed whispers a testament to Brad's outburst. Emily, her cheeks burning with shame, wished she could teleport herself anywhere but here. As Brad launched into a scathing critique of the restaurant's culinary shortcomings, Emily's mind raced for an escape route. This wasn't just a bad date, it was a full-blown disaster. Each condescending remark, each arrogant gesture from Brad chipped away at her initial hope, leaving her feeling trapped and deeply uneasy. She discreetly pulled out her phone, her thumb hovering over her best friend's contact. Operation Get Me Out of Here was officially in motion. Emily quickly typed a message, her plea for help disguised as a casual update. "Hey girl, this date's a snooze fest. Might need a rescue mission soon. Be ready." Just as Brad's tirade reached its peak, Emily's phone vibrated with a reply. Her heart leaped with a mixture of relief and anticipation. Her best friend, a master of disguise and a loyal accomplice in Emily's dating misadventures, was ready to deploy. "Oh my God!" Emily gasped, her voice a perfect blend of shock and concern. "That's my roommate! She's locked herself out of the apartment! Again! I have to go!" Brad, his self-absorbed bubble momentarily burst, frowned. "Right now? But what about dessert?" he whined, his earlier anger replaced by a petulant pout. Section 4. The check, please. Ignoring Brad's protests, Emily grabbed her purse and shot up from her seat. "It's an emergency. I'll catch you later," she tossed over her shoulder, already halfway across the restaurant. Relief washed over her with each step that took her further away from Brad and his overcooked risotto. As she reached the exit, she could feel Brad's eyes burning into her back. Turning briefly, she caught a glimpse of him still seated at the table, a thunderous expression on his face. Good, let him stew, she thought to herself. Then, with a final, triumphant glance, Emily pushed open the door and escaped into the cool night air. Section 5. One last dig. Reaching the sanctuary of her car, Emily let out a sigh of relief. She quickly sent a quick text to her best friend confirming her successful escape. As she fumbled with her keys, a smug sense of satisfaction washed over her. She'd dodged a bullet, and she hadn't even had to fake a family emergency. Just as she was about to slide into the driver's seat, her phone buzzed with a notification. It was a text from Brad. "You're different from other girls," the message read. Emily scoffed. "Oh, the classic 'you're not like other girls' line. How original." She was about to block his number when another text popped up. "I like that you're not afraid to speak your mind." Speak her mind? He was delusional. Section 1. The Follow. The crisp night air did little to cool Emily's racing pulse. Her phone screen, still displaying Brad's last text, seemed to burn her hand. She shoved it back into her purse, needing to put as much distance between her and that restaurant, between her and as possible. It was then, in the relative quiet of the emptying city block, that she heard it, the distinct, too-even rhythm of footsteps echoing behind her. Her breath hitched. "Don't be paranoid," she told herself. "It's a Friday night, of course there are other people around." But the uneasy feeling that had taken root in her stomach during dinner now twisted into a full-blown knot of dread. She risked a glance over her shoulder. A tall, dark figure was gaining on her, their features obscured by the shadows of a nearby awning. Her heart hammered against her ribs. It couldn't be, could it? "Brad?" Emily's voice came out breathy, betraying her fear. He stopped beside her, a touch too close for comfort. The streetlight illuminated his face, and his earlier charm seemed to have morphed into something off. "Hey, fancy meeting you here," he said, his tone a shade too cheerful. "Thought I'd walk you to your car, make sure you're safe." Emily's mind raced. "Safe? From? Oh, that's thoughtful," she stammered. "But really it's fine, it's not far." She picked up her pace, hoping he'd take the hint. He didn't. Instead, he fell into step beside her, matching her stride for stride. "I insist," he said, his voice taking on an edge that sent chills down Emily's spine. "It's a dangerous world out there for a pretty girl like you." They reached the entrance of the parking lot, a desolate expanse of concrete and flickering fluorescent lights. Emily's car, tucked away in the farthest corner, felt miles away. With each step deeper into the lot, the oppressive silence seemed to amplify her fear. "You know," Brad said, breaking the silence, "I knew there was something special about you from the moment I saw your profile." Emily forced a tight smile, her grip on her keys tightening. "Right," she mumbled, her mind frantically searching for an escape route. There was no one around, and the lot was eerily quiet. "You're not like those other girls on that app," he continued, his voice taking on an almost possessive tone. "Those shallow, vapid creatures." Emily's blood ran cold. His words were like venom, dripping with a possessiveness that made her skin crawl. They reached her car, its silver paint reflecting the distorted light from the flickering lamppost above. "So," Brad said, stepping closer, his body blocking her access to the driver's side door, "how about that Nightcap? My place isn't far, and I've got a great bottle of wine waiting to be opened." Emily's heart pounded against her ribs. This wasn't a request, it was a demand veiled in false pleasantries. "I really can't," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "My roommate, she's really freaking out." In her haste to get away, she fumbled with her keys, dropping them with a clatter. As she bent down to retrieve them, Brad leaned down too, his face inches from hers. "Don't play coy," he whispered, his breath hot on her cheek. "I know you want to." His words were like a physical blow. Emily recoiled, scrambling back from his touch. "Back off, Brad," she said, her voice shaking but firm. Section 5. Special Emily. The anger that flashed across Brad's face was like a bucket of ice water thrown over Emily's fear. This man was dangerous. "Fine," he spat, his voice laced with venom. "Suit yourself, but don't come crawling back when you realize what you're missing." Emily didn't dignify his words with a response. She quickly scooped up her keys, unlocked her car, and slid behind the wheel, the flimsy barrier of metal and glass suddenly feeling like the only thing standing between her and him. As she fastened her seatbelt, her hands trembling, she saw Brad still standing there watching her every move. His eyes, cold and calculating, seemed to bore into her, a predator denied its prey. She started the engine, the roar a welcome sound in the suffocating silence. Putting the car in reverse, she caught one last glimpse of him in her rearview mirror. A tall, dark figure consumed by the shadows, his face an unreadable mask of resentment. Emily didn't waste any time. She pulled out of the parking lot, her heart pounding in her chest, the echo of Brad's words ringing in her ears. "You're different, Emily. I can tell." Section 1. Safe at home? The drive home was a blur. Emily navigated the familiar streets on autopilot, her mind replaying the evening's events, the restaurant, the awkward conversation, the chilling walk to the car, each scene flashing before her eyes. As she pulled into her apartment building's parking lot, a wave of exhaustion washed over her. All she wanted was to curl up in bed, forget the disastrous date ever happened, and maybe swear off online dating forever. But even as she climbed out of her car, a nagging sense of unease lingered. Had Brad followed her? She chided herself for the irrational thought. Of course he hadn't followed her. That was crazy talk, wasn't it? Fumbling with her keys, she finally unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The familiar scent of her apartment building, usually comforting, did little to quell the unease that had taken root deep in her gut. The hallway was empty, the only sound the faint hum of the refrigerator from a nearby apartment. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Section 2. Blocked and deleted. Stepping inside her apartment, Emily finally allowed herself to breathe. She locked the door behind her, the satisfying click of the deadbolt, a small victory in the face of the evening's unsettling events. She tossed her purse on the couch, the sound oddly loud in the quiet apartment. As if on cue, her phone buzzed, the screen illuminating her darkened living room with an unwelcome glow. It was a text message from Brad. Her heart pounded in her chest as she snatched up the phone. "You're different, Emily, I can tell." The words, seemingly harmless just moments ago, now sent a chill down her spine. Without hesitation, Emily blocked his number, deleting the message before she could even process its full impact. She then went a step further, deleting his profile from the dating app and then, in a final act of digital defiance, deleting the app itself. She wouldn't be needing that again anytime soon. Just as the silence of her apartment began to feel oppressive, her phone rang again. This time it was her best friend, her voice a welcome sound in the stillness. "Oh my God, Emily, are you okay?" Her friend's voice was laced with concern, instantly calming Emily's frayed nerves. "He followed me to the parking lot," Emily whispered, her voice trembling as she recounted the final chilling moments of the date. "He wanted to come back to my place." On the other end of the line, her friend gasped. "What a creep! I knew there was something off about that guy. You did the right thing by getting out of there." Her friend's words, filled with a mixture of anger and concern, were a soothing balm to Emily's raw nerves. As they talked, recounting the events of the evening in excruciating detail, Emily felt a wave of relief wash over her. She wasn't alone. She had someone she could trust, someone who understood the absurdity and at times the sheer terror that came with navigating the treacherous waters of online dating. After ending the call with her friend, Emily went through her usual nighttime routine with a speed and efficiency born from a desperate need to feel safe and secure within her own home. She locked her windows, checked the deadbolt twice, and even placed a chair under her doorknob, a childhood habit she thought she'd long outgrown. Finally, exhausted both physically and emotionally, she crawled into bed, pulling the covers up to her chin. As she lay there trying to will her racing heart to slow down, her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Her eyes flew open, her body tensing in fear. The number was unknown. She stared at the screen, her mind a whirlwind of possibilities. Could it be him? Had he found a way to contact her despite her best efforts? Hesitantly, she reached for the phone, her finger hovering over the screen. Taking a deep breath, she clicked on the message. "Good night, Emily," it read. "Sweet dreams." The message was unsigned, but the implication was clear. He knew where she lived, and he was watching her. Emily's blood ran ice cold. The phone slipped from her grasp, landing silently on the duvet. The words on the screen echoed in the silence of her bedroom. Sweet dreams. He was a stalker who had infiltrated her reality. The realization hit her, stealing the air from her lungs. Every creak and rustle became a whisper of his presence. Her apartment now felt like a cage. How had he found her? Why was he doing this? The thought left her trembling and breathless. Sleep, when it finally came, was a fitful escape filled with nightmares of being chased through dark alleys, her pursuer always one step behind. The rising sun, usually a welcome sight, brought little comfort. It only served as a stark reminder that she was starting a new day, one shrouded in a fear she couldn't escape. The world outside her apartment door, once so familiar and inviting, now felt like a minefield of unknown dangers. Every stranger's glance, every passing car could be him, watching her, waiting for the right moment to strike. The carefree confidence she'd once possessed had vanished, replaced by a bone-deep wariness that threatened to consume her. Taking a deep breath, Emily knew she couldn't let fear paralyze her. She had to take control, had to fight back against the terror that threatened to engulf her. She reached for her phone, her finger hovering over the contact for the police. This was no longer just a bad date, a story to share with friends over drinks. This was her life now, a chilling reminder that the monsters lurking in the shadows weren't always figments of our imaginations. Sometimes they were just a swipe away.
The shadows are restless tonight, and so are we. If you're brave enough, hit that like button. Let us know what you think in the comments. And subscribe for more spine-tingling stories that lurk just around the corner.